Welcome to the Your Business on Purpose podcast, the ultimate resource for women business owners looking to confidently navigate their entrepreneurial journey while upholding their principles. I'm Dawnette Palmore, your host and fellow entrepreneur. Join me as we immerse ourselves in illuminating conversations with accomplished experts spanning various fields across the business spectrum. Together, we'll unearth strategic insights into seizing opportunities and ensuring that your business is equipped with the essential elements aligned with your purpose and values. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Your Business on Purpose podcast. I am your host, Dawnette Palmore, and today we're diving into a topic that I know will resonate with so many of you, redefining retention. Why psychological safety is a financial strategy. So I can't wait to dive into this topic, but too often business owners think of team dynamics as and trust as like a soft skill, right? But the truth is they're directly tied to your bottom line. When your team feels safe, supported, and valued, you don't just reduce turnover, which is a headache in itself, but you unlock productivity, loyalty, and ultimately, what we all love and are striving for, and the reason we're in business, is profitability. So today we're going to unpack why investing in psychological safety isn't just good leadership. It's a smart financial move. Before we get started, let me introduce you to my guest. Francie Jain is the founder and CEO of Terrawatt, a B2B marketplace that helps healthcare organizations reduce turnover through expert-led group coaching. She is committed to transforming how employers understand the relationship between professional development and employee retention. Before launching Terrawatt, she founded West River Partners, a consulting company that raised capital for emerging markets-based equity hedge funds. Francie holds an AB from Princeton University and an MBA from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, where she refined her expertise in data and analytics to drive strategic decisions. Francie, thank you so much for being on the show. And before I have you talk more about yourself, what is an AB?
Oh my gosh, I know. It's really just to be really specific, but Princeton has this weirdo thing where they do an AB, not a BA.
Oh, okay.
And so like at one point I was like, is that really right? And then I went to my diploma and it really is an AB. And even though it's really exactly the same as a BA, but everyone's like, you inverted the letters, but that's technically what I have. But
okay,
it's
we'll leave it to
basically the undergraduate degree. I mean,
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for explaining that because I'm sure everybody was curious about that. So tell us a little bit more about, who you are and what you do exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just like a regular person who I really came to realize how important like therapy is or coaching and how it really has like in many ways changed my life. Just having that expert to work with. And so that's like, we can just put that on kind of one side of my life. But what happened was initially I started to pay attention to a statistic about the decline in manufacturing jobs in America. And it was like a really big number. I've since learned that actually the peak of manufacturing in America was in the 1940s. So in any time series you look at, it's going to be a steep decline. But the point is, where do people go whose careers are going away? And what is the support system? Like, who's helping them? And the reason I started asking this question is because it's actually like, that's almost one of my superpowers is that I was really I often had switched careers. Like I've often done it. And I just do it, I've figured it out through, just having a series of conversations and talking to people and just sort of being doggedly interested in getting that space. But I know from doing that it freaks people out.
Yeah.
Because most people want you to like jump, especially people who are not you, want you to be in a career that feels safe to them and that you kind of progress sort of steadily through. And it feels really unsafe for a lot of people. And so I started to realize like, wow, maybe that's like a superpower for me. Maybe I can help other people. And I didn't really want to be a coach, but I did want to help people more in like create the scaffolding. And so that's what Terrawatt is. It's sort of been a long and windy startup kind of road, but where we ended was group coaching that made it affordable for the group I call the sophisticated middle. So there are people in the middle of the organization who are quite sophisticated and quite good at what they do. They've been in their career for a long time. But their salary doesn't work for them, for their employer to pay for one-on-one coaching. Because oftentimes that relationship has to do with, like, for instance, if you're a CEO and you're making $5 million a year, if you hire a coach who's like $50,000 for a certain amount of time, that's just a drop in the bucket in terms of the ratio of those amounts. So if you make $150,000, your company is not going to think a $50,000 coach is a great idea for you. But if you're able to find that person who's an expert in the space and you come with other colleagues, you can divide by the number of people who are using it. So for instance, let's say there's a series of group coaching sessions with the coach, and you have 30 people from your company doing it, then, it's per person is 50,000 divided by 30. And it's a lot more affordable. And then, by the way, it's probably less than going to a conference. And so that's kind of like one of the things that I think is a really interesting substitute. Like for me personally, I'd rather learn from an expert where I can ask questions and I can practice and I can sort of sleep on it and be with people who are like equally motivated, as opposed to going to a conference where you listen to people speak and you probably learn a lot, but you kind of sit on your butt, you don't practice it. There's this whole like world of like adult pedagogical, like how adults learn, like adult pedagogy, I guess is what it's called. And I did a whole deep dive into that at one point. And basically what it just shows is like as adults, we learn through like social interactions, we learn through teaching, we learn through reflecting, through writing. There are all these different ways, and like none of those are in a conference.
Right. Because they can't be.
Right. But really, by the way, the main point of a conference is for the conference owner to get paid. I mean, they're looking really just for people to buy tickets. And I know that on the other side of it, like I've had booths there for Terrawatt, and they were promising me like, 50,000 people are coming or 10,000 people are coming. And there was like nobody there. And I was like, how? I was like, either people are buying tickets and not going, or these numbers aren't right. And so I was like, I don't know what it is, but like, this isn't for me anyway. But my point is, I think that we all want to make sure that any amount of money we're spending on behalf of employees is a good use of money and like a high ROI. And so, what's cool about coaching, and especially with psychological safety, which is this like component, it's a term that was created by a woman named, I think Dr. Amy Edmonton. I think she created it, but she at least popularized it. I'm not sure if she created the exact term, but really the idea is that it's a group dynamic. And it means that when you're in this group, whether it's your team or could be like your whole company, everyone feels as though they won't be penalized for telling the truth or talking about a mistake or anything kind of negative. And what that looks like in practice, when you first hear that, you're like, yeah, I can't imagine a place that would happen to. But here's what it is. Like in the hospital, if you say, oh, I just gave the person the wrong medicine, are you going to tell your colleagues, and will that be noted as an error that day? Or you do not tell your colleagues and you have lower errors in the organization? Because if you tell your colleagues and you feel safe to tell them, and they can say, oh, that happens to me sometimes too, let's put a process in place so that doesn't happen. That's psychological safety. The opposite is, you are a terrible worker. I can't believe you did that. You are on the edge of getting fired. So like those are, identical things happen, and there are two different ways to kind of address it. And, this can happen in a myriad of different ways in all kinds of places. But psychological safety became really, really interesting and on the tip of everyone's tongue after Google talked about that this one single thread that united all of its best teams was a high degree of psychological safety. And what it meant is, if you want to be an innovative company or you want to have high efficiency, it's psychological safety that determines that. And so in the end, if we're going to live in a capitalist society where the state is not paying us a salary, we are getting paid based on the profits of our firm, our organization. Everyone's interested in efficiency and innovation and profitability. And I think that there's this notion that, especially it's more like the baby boomer generation, or maybe even the one above that, but like the sort of macho tough guy thing and like pushing people harder and being really like aggro is going to make people do better work. But really what it is that the organization benefits from this sort of openness of discussion and problems and solutions for the problems. There's also actually my co-founder, at one point I was talking to him about like managing people at some point, and he said, listen, he's like, mistakes are fine, because he's like a very long-term like startup kind of a guy. He's like, mistakes are fine, that happens everywhere, but you just have to find a way to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think that's the attitude, right? It's like, how can we prevent that from happening again and make this a better place to work so that we're all doing better work? And that's always what I'm trying to find. And so ultimately, places with high turnover typically are places that have low psychological safety. Because it also is connected to kind of respect for the individual, and other sort of soft skills. I'm doing air quotes here.
Yeah.
But so the idea is like, you wouldn't expect it, but like if you have a turnover problem, for instance, if your organization has a higher turnover rate than the average of your industry, then psychological safety could be an incredible way to start to save money. And I think when people think, oh, I'm lowering retention, I'm going to be lowering standards, or I'm going to be bringing a ping pong table, or, bringing in freebies or nice to have things that seem like a luxury. But really the ROI on psychological safety is really high, because everyone in your company could just read a book, right? And you could have a book roundtable or some sort of discussion, a book club, and everyone can discuss it and all get better together. So yeah. If you're reducing a few percentage points of employee turnover a year by doing that, that's a huge ROI if everyone just bought a book. Or you could do coaching, which is what we do, and we help people do that. But ultimately, the main thing is that it's just people just don't understand that like the kind of aggro, I'm going to scare the bejesus out of you so that you work better. It just doesn't actually work. That's really not. It might feel better to say that to somebody, but it actually doesn't get the effect that you want.
I totally agree. And just thinking about, when we start at a lower level and, trying to remember that, like we had to start too.
Yeah.
And that they're human beings with feelings and families and all these, problems, and they're just like us.
Yeah.
And here we are putting this pressure on them because we want them to do a good job, instead of just working with them and making them feel safe, as you said, so that they're just a better worker. And it's like, why has this taken so long to get through to us? I don't know, but I'm glad that you're doing this work, because it's very important. And when we think about, all the employees and, they drive our business, we won't have a business without them. So we should treat them right and not look at them as a lower level anything.
Yeah, exactly. Or here's the other way to think about it, right? Because humans are not widgets, right? It's one thing when like, if you can like turn up a knob and you can make 5 more widgets an hour, that's one thing. It just doesn't work with humans that way. And I think we all know that, right? We all know that there's like a way when you say things, sometimes you get good results. If you say it differently, you get better results. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
But I will say that not everyone knows what those things are and how to do that. And then I'll go back even further and say that I find it hard, and I bet a lot of other people do, speaking in a way where I'm paying attention to what the person is hearing. I'm often let me present to you my wonderful idea. But really, what I should be saying is, here's why you should care what I have to say. And those are really different things. And it's a really different way of being, because we are not taught that way growing up, right? I mean, I always felt like, at least my education was like very focused on myself and what I could show the teacher and how I could get good grades. And it was very little about how can I really effectively teach the group, or how am I getting my ideas across? Or what's the retention of what I'm saying to the group? I mean, like that's never measured.
Right. In school it was.
Yeah, but and many of these teachers, I mean, well, I don't know what it's like to be a teacher, but I think, unless you're measuring what the kids are learning, maybe how do we know that like the kids are really getting what the teacher is saying? I mean, we always know there are better teachers in the force teachers. And I'm sure some of that has to do with presenting the subject matter in a way that is really easy to comprehend as like the listener. And actually I do that now on like ChatGPT and Claude for my emails, is I say, here's what I want to say. Can you rewrite this so it's like easier to read, like or easier to understand what I'm saying? And then oftentimes it will like group it into ways and find these like sort of parallels that make it really easy. And that to me is like so helpful, because that's actually one of like my lowest areas of, excellence is in like translating for like someone to hear what I'm saying. I'm always thinking about what I want to get out.
Yeah. I love that. That's really good. I love ChatGPT, but that's a whole nother conversation. So besides obviously having to retrain these people, or train new people, what are some of the hidden costs of poor retention or a toxic work environment, right? That business owners could be overlooking?
Okay. So here's the best way for me to answer that. There's this incredible case study we have, from one of our coaches. So basically, there was a hospital in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So it's not one of like the top 2 or 3 biggest cities in Colorado. So it's this relatively small town. They had, I think the hospital was like 4,200 employees. They had a 24 or 23% employee turnover rate, which meant every year, 23-24% of their employees are leaving.
That's a lot.
And that was in comparison to the average U.S. national hospital turnover rate of 20%. So they're doing worse than their peers. And they're in a small town.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can imagine the hiring starts to get hard, right? Unless you're going to pay people lots of money to move, and like that becomes expensive. So their question was, okay, well, how do we reduce employee turnover? So they brought in this content that was created by one of our coaches. His name is Dr. Tommy Thomas, which is like an awesome name. And it was called Opposite Strengths. And it's basically the idea of teaching people that the way you think and your strengths might be different from somebody else's. And that doesn't make mine better or yours better or anything like that. But it's that there are different ways to solve problems. And there's no one right way to necessarily solve problems. So that was his content, and it was he would kind of do like 5-hour trainings in person, and everyone did it at the organization. So this from the CEOs and the C-suite down, and it was an opt-in. And after the first year of offering these sessions, they had a 2% decline in employee turnover. So then they were down to 22%, 21, 22%. So, and that started happening every year. And so you can imagine 4,200 people, 1% decline is significant. And if you think about what is the cost of replacing a person, I mean, that's a whole other side.
Yeah.
Like
it's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's all. But you could put like shorthand, you could say like it's one salary or half a salary, whatever, right? Just imagine, right? So like all those people that are still are staying now. And so every year that started happening, like 1% to 2%, it would go down. And it kept, but in like a very steady way. And after 9 years, and there's so like every year they would come, have these other like groups of 40 people that's in-person training. And after 9 years, they got to 4% employee turnover, which is an incredible result.
So, yeah. Wow. Okay, yeah, keep going. Like, sorry, I was just like, right. Whoa, that's crazy.
It's not crazy. Right. So it's like really low. So it means that like, yeah, people are leaving, but for probably really good reasons and probably ways you couldn't have prevented. Yeah. Maybe they're taking care of a parent, they're moving across the country. I mean, there are things happening, but it's not because they're frustrated at work or maybe who knows, but the point is most people are doing well and happy with the job. And I think that's a really healthy turnover rate. And so what was cool about that is that the CEO then told Dr. Thomas that the difference in money cost and difference in retained earnings from when they had 23% turnover to when they had 4% turnover was $32 million a year.
Wow.
So, okay, so then you have to go like, whoa. So I think part of this case study, what you have to know is that the hospitals have a different way of the different kind of expenses than like the average organization. Yeah. So there's this thing called a travel nurse or traveling nurse. Mm-hmm. I always say traveling nurse, but I think it's actually travel nurse. And what happens is these are people who you'll pay like 3 or 4, you'll hire on a contract basis for 3 or 4 months. and they get paid 1.5 to 2 times the rate of nurses that are, hired sort of annually with full benefits. And the reason they do this is like to plug a hole. But the problem is it's obviously very expensive, and it becomes a little bit of a downward spiral, because then you have people training the nurses, and by the time they get up to speed, then they leave.
Oh, gosh.
And then you also, what started happening is the error rate started going down. Then you had better HCAHPS. You had the patients were reporting better experiences.
Oh, wow.
And so you had both like organization level stuff was better. So like things that were like error rate went down, or problems.
Well, it's a ripple effect.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's all related. And so that's what's cool too, is you can't say, oh, well, it was just retention went down, that was it. Like, what do we care? It's actually all interconnected, because, and basically what the employees were learning is, instead of saying, this is the right way to do it, and you have to do this or else, you're going to do it wrong. They started to, be able to meet in the middle and say, listen, there's some things in medicine that are black and white. You have to do, or don't, like there's probably a right way to put in a catheter, right? A right way to give a vaccine. But there's a lot of things in the middle where it doesn't have to necessarily be one way or the other. And the process doesn't exactly have to be the same, because ultimately the goal is like, keeping the person alive or making them better, whatever the ultimate kind of North Star is for the hospital. And so once people started to like understand that better, that's when things started to really change for the hospital. And I think, and that's kind of, and here's another crazy statistic. So when they had the really high turnover, like 23, 24%, they had one applicant per open role.
Oh, gosh.
And by the time, which is not great, no choice, right?
Yeah.
An average, which means some roles are zero.
Oh, gosh.
Which again was probably the travel nurse thing, right? They're like, well, let's throw a travel nurse in there so we can hire someone. Like, well, then you're paying for, twice the salary. So, and then by the end, when they got to 4% employee turnover, they had like 62 applicants per position open. And then you had a ton of choice, and then it's like champagne problems, right? And then it's a question of like, okay, it's hard. It's so hard. So many people are applying, but like, you know what? That's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
When you get to exactly pick who you want. And it also means, by the way, they're probably not paying a lot of headhunter fees, because everyone wants to work there. People are probably calling up their spouses or their cousins or whoever, and they're like, oh, there's an open position. Do you want to do it? And so there are all these other like ripple effects. And then they started winning awards. They're winning these like hospital awards.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just this sort of cool case study. And I think about it all the time, because it's really what we're all trying to go for, right? It's like, it's hard to tease it all out exactly, and I'm sure someone could at some point, but it's really the idea of finding ways to like help the employees be more flexible and come up with like better efficiencies and processes and find ways to connect with others. And
right.
And
it's even including them, right? Because sometimes things change, even if say we were a nurse and we made it up to CEO or however that worked, maybe that was 20 years ago. It worked 20 years ago isn't working today. Yes. So to listen to the employees and listening to what they have to say, but not only does this affect the work environment, but it's affecting families and communities. Like, it's going so much deeper than we can even think. So the ROI is immeasurable.
Yeah, that's a great point. Right. Because then people are bringing it back home. It's not like they learn this in work and they don't do it anywhere else. Right. Exactly. Which probably means the whole community is probably just doing great problem solving all around.
Yeah. And they're happier people, right? When you're happy at work, you're going to be happy at home. And it's just, it's like, I think Jim Rohn talks about Who Kicked My Cat, right? This lady's boss gets yelled at. He yells at her. She goes home and yells at her kid. And then the kid kicks the cat. And it's like, it got taken out on the next person. And so we can look at the same thing. Maybe we can call it Who Pet My Cat or something, take the cat to a spa day or something, because you had such because your boss had a great day, which means you had a great day. And it just was this ripple effect. And sometimes I think we disconnect, even as, business owners and things like that, we disconnect from the humanity of it all.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing that I am fascinated by whenever I read the research and stuff. And like, I think the reason that it's taken us so long to see the humanity in the workers is because we're also primed for this, like, what do you call, like, industrial kind of worker relationship. We are making widgets, and can we make one more widget an hour? What
Mm.
do we do to turn the knob? But now we don't work like that, right? It's about our brains. It's about, like, all the things that are like binary and repetitive can be automated at this point. So humans have the ability to, like, uniquely, like, problem solve, be creative, come up with new solutions. And, like, that's really a great use for human brain, as
Yeah.
opposed to, like, working harder and faster and producing more as though we were a machine.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I think about what came to my mind was, okay, they built these pyramids that have lasted thousands of years, and then we build now buildings that fall apart pretty quickly. So, like,
Yeah.
somewhere we lost the deep thinking, and I think we're getting back to that, where we can really
Yeah.
truly, like, how can we make this building stand for thousands of years? Like, what do we need to change? What did they do? Like, they didn't have the things we had. How did they, there's so much we can go into that.
No,
But
it's so true, right? It's like the long-term vision, right? Like a pyramid that lasts for 1,000 years, like it probably took them a while to figure out how to do that. Right. And I think, but that's the whole thing also with business as well. Like, yeah, maybe you don't want to be doing this business until the day you die, but if you want to have a business that thrives and works well, you want to find a way to get people everyone being can do. That's what I keep thinking about this conversation too. Is like, we all know people who are like, God, that's such a can do person. And that's probably someone who functions very high with psychological safety, right? Because it's like, it's not scary to take responsibility for that person. They're asking questions to try to figure out how it can be done better. And it makes everyone, like, relax, because you feel like, oh God, I don't have to sort of like be perfect and have this, like, armor up. I can sort of like solve the problem with this person.
yeah, it could be more of a collaborative experience versus I'm the boss, I know better than you type
Yeah.
of, experience because we don't know everything. It doesn't matter what position we're in. When
Yeah.
you think about, people who are wealthy or in high status, they have many advisors around them because they don't know everything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing this always makes me think of, there's this incredible book I read called Turn the Ship Around.
Mm.
And it was written by, actually, a naval, a naval captain who was in charge of a nuclear submarine. So a
Oh
naval
gosh.
submarine captain. Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah. And basically the way submarines work is that it's really it's really scary, because you basically have a bomb and you're traveling under, like, many, I don't know how many feet,
Pounds
miles
of
or whatever,
water, like
water.
it's all
Yeah, you
that
have all the
pressure.
water
Yeah.
pressing down on this bomb, right? So every single thing has to be very carefully calibrated. And so typically, he said, in the typical way of, like, managing, was that everything went through the captain. It would be like, hey, I need to replace a screw. Can I use this one? Like that kind of thing. It would be these, like, crazy minute questions. And at some point he was like, this is crazy. I can't live like this. This is impossible. There are not enough hours in the day. And so he switched the whole thing so that everyone was responsible and an expert in their area.
Mm.
And so instead of saying, hey, Captain, can I use this screw for this spot? We don't have any more of this thing. I need to do that. They would say, Captain, I propose we do this because of this, because of this, because of this. And the captain would either say yes, or tell me more, or maybe, like, try this and see what happens and come back. It was like, and it became this really, really effective submarine. In the end, they went from, like, the worst submarine in the fleet to, like, the top. Because they were just making fewer mistakes, because the people who are responsible for their areas weren't, like, ducking out of the way to not get in trouble for errors, but they're like, oh, here's an error, I'm going to solve it. And it just completely changed the whole vibe on the ship. And then
Wow.
people started getting promoted a lot, and it was a very happy, people were really happy place to work, and all these other problems got solved because everyone started being very can do, as opposed to being like, oh, not my problem, like, oh, you deal with
Yeah.
that.
Wow. So what do you think are some small practical steps leaders can build or start taking to build a psychologically safe environment in their
Yeah.
workplace?
Well, one thing I'm really big on is like surveys and questionnaires.
Anonymous, right?
Yeah, just anonymous. I mean, right.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like really cool to like hear what people have to say about something. Until you ask them, you don't exactly know. And I think one of the things with psychological safety is like, and then you're making them public, and saying, and then by the way, 4 people have mentioned the cleanliness of the bathroom. So thank you. We're going to have them clean twice a day, or whatever the thing is. But sort of being really like transparent about how changes are being made. And you can also say like, this person asked for, Skittles in the bathrooms, and okay, that's a cute idea, but we're not going to do that. It doesn't have to always be yes. But I can just say like transparently, that doesn't make sense to us, but let me know if there's another reason you think that's a good idea or whatever. But I think that and then letting people see like the impact changes have on the organization. And again, like you said, it's not someone just saying I'm the boss and therefore I decide everything that goes on here. It's kind of like, wow, that's a good idea. Like, how can we make that work? I think so. That's number one for me. I also think asking more questions, like really trying to understand what people are talking about, and sometimes it can be that the conflict may just be like just misunderstanding or miscommunication about what's going on, or it could even be miscommunication about what the goal is. Like, so, for instance, if I'm in a hospital, like, what is my number one goal? Like, not my number one goal should be to like care for people, keep them alive, keep them safe, and get them out of the hospital healthy. But when you're at a place where the number one goal is like your self-image or your promotion, right? Rewarding those kinds of goals is really bad. And I think that what you want to really look for are people that are like the can-do people that are really trying to solve problems, as opposed to like, say, clever little things in meetings.
Right. Okay, so this was just such a great powerful conversation. Something to really deeply think, and even myself as I build out a team, thinking about those things, because leadership isn't really about power or that you oversee people. It's about empowering the people under you to rise to in their gifts and talents.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's really about. And so thank you for bringing, all that stuff back into light, and how we can actually apply that into our businesses, and how important it is to apply in our businesses. Because it's, like I said, it's just such a ripple effect deeper than we could ever know. So if they're saying, oh my gosh, I need to like learn how to get this into my business, how can they find you?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can find us at terrawatt.co. That's the website. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and Terrawatt's on LinkedIn. Those are probably our best ways. And yeah, I'm happy to speak to anyone, especially if they have questions about this. And, we just sort of do it through group coaching, but I think psychological safety, like I said, could be done a million different ways. And I think Amy Edmondson is really, really cool and smart. And I've been reading her books lately, and that's a great way to go too. So we don't have, the lock on psychological safety. You can kind of get it anywhere, but I think that it's really like the 21st century way.
This podcast is dedicated to you and all the incredible women out there making a reverse back. We're turning the boat around back, striving to make it all work. I hope that today's episode just really has opened your eyes to the reality of. Could you do me a favor? Be a gem and leave a review. It will help us reach even more women, making a bigger impact. Your feedback is invaluable, and I would genuinely appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, ensuring you never miss an episode. Until next week, live a purposeful life in both your business and your finances.